Hi, everybody. I'm here with Matthew Ellis, and we're talking recruiter enablement. So first of all, Matthew, thank you for joining me. Give us a quick introduction to you.
Hey, Adam. Yeah, thanks for having me also. So my name's Matt, founder and CEO at Scede, one of the sort of early organizations in what has now become the embedded talent space. And I also have group responsibility across Scede and People Collective. And between us, we work with scaling organizations to help them from a recruiting perspective, but also from a people perspective as well.
Tell me about People Collective, because I've heard the name, but I'm actually not sure what it does.
Yeah, they're a great organization who, if I suppose I break it down this way, if Scede do the recruiting part, there's the you've got the talent, now what element. So we in the summer of last year, we decided to closely collaborate together. As I say, if we're doing the recruitment, then how can another organization support with things like roles, leveling, progression, compensation, training, enabling managers to be effective, etc., etc., etc. So it seemed like a very sort of natural progression, or a start and stop, or stop and start from what Scede are doing.
Great. Okay. So you and I have had a previous conversation about recruiter enablement, and I found it really interesting and thought it would be great to get you to talk a bit more about it, like on a wider audience. So what's it all about? What's it mean to Scede? What have you been doing? In whatever order you want to answer the questions.
Okay, yeah. So I guess for context, with Scede are in embedded talent, RPO, however you want to position it. So enabling recruiters to be successful is super important from where we sit as a service provider. And we have that dual context, right, where we have the Scede side of our business, but we also have the unique context times however many different organizations we have. So it's something that we've have to focus on by the very nature of our business. And I'll kind of talk about it from all entirely from my perspective, right? And I know this is very much a space that's being defined. So from where I sit, I think it's something that's like very much layered and has sort of foundations that are built upon. And I suppose there's maybe even like a recruiter enablement maturity scale, like we've seen for sort of TA maturity from that perspective. So I guess in quick summary, like how do I see the layers? They probably fall into the following categories, and I'll go into a bit more detail on each one afterwards. But there's definitely this sort of learning core recruiter fundamentals piece at the base. I think there's a kind of processes and rituals piece. I think there's a data piece, arguments whether that's in RecOps or this or that. We don't have RecOps, that sits in our sort of enablement piece. There's access to resources and information. And then there's a whole kind of broad range of tooling where, you know, things like poetry come into play. And I'll give a bit of context on each of those layers as I understand them, and you can hit me with questions as we go. But I'm super passionate about recruiter fundamentals. I don't think you can receive like the fundamental skills of being a recruiter. I don't think you can achieve maximum potential in your function or your TA team if you don't have the fundamental skills for recruiters locked down. And I suppose you can enhance a clapped out car, but it's still a clapped out car, right? So I think you really need to make sure that you have those sort of core recruiting fundamentals and principles locked in as like your base layer before you even think about progressing on from that. And I think I watched one or two of these before, and I think this is a point that many others have raised, but those sorts of processes and rituals I think are really important from a recruiter enablement point of view. Like, how does the TA unit function in itself? What are the processes they follow? How does that function interact with stakeholders in the business, or stakeholders in our case, but your business if you're internally? And what are the activities that team does to enable success in the unique context of that particular team? Like a sort of how operating procedures, maybe you might want to call it, but like, I think that's a really important part. The data bit, I think, is just a massive topic, right? But I think I'll break it down into a few different areas. I think being clear on overall organizational objectives and OKRs from a numbers perspective is super essential, just from an alignment perspective. And understanding what good metrics look like in the context of your team and organization, I think, are super important. So we all know what we're shooting towards and what our guide rails are from a good perspective. And then there's the The obvious piece around data is just having the ability to use data to identify areas of improvement and efficiency and enable and enhance that performance towards that common goal, I think is super, super important. Resources and information, again, just a wide open topic, but who remembers everything? I don't. So where is that information that you need, and how easily can you find it? And that information could be in relation to the stuff that we mentioned before, or any other sort of static information. It could be process docs, it could be company copy, it could be understanding who are the SMEs or the people that can help you and enable you with different bits and pieces. Like, there's a load in there, right? And that just sort of really depends on who you are as a business and how you operate. And again, that's important for us from a Scede point of view, because we have like our bit of what we do and how we operate, but we also have that incredibly important customer bit, which is how they operate and their process flows and their copy and their this and their that we have to make sure that we're absolutely aligned on from both a candidate and a hiring manager experience perspective. So that's a big one for us. And then the tooling piece, again, like hugely wide open, where solutions like Poetry come into their own. If we know what we're supposed to be doing as recruiters and we've got those core skills, if we understand the processes, rituals, operating procedures, we have everything sort of around us from a base level or base level plus perspective, like what things can we do, can we be given, can we use to enhance our kind of performance as recruiters, I think is sort of I have it last in my list, because I believe that tools are enablers and you have to have a good foundation to be able to enable, right? And I think it's I made a sort of a jovial LinkedIn post about it, about AI, but like I think there's a bunch of people that think they can come into work and press play, in 2024 and beyond. But my belief is that tools enable and enhance what you have there already. So if the level's already high, you're pushing on from that. If the level's low, yeah, it's a bit better, but it's still probably substandard. So that's my strange view of the world.
No, that's not strange at all. I love the way that you have put it into components, and the components all make complete sense to me. I like visualize it in a slightly different way, but I think we're covering the same things. And what I'd love to know is, like, has this been within Scede, has this been a organic sort of process over a period of years, or did you have a hold on a second moment where you went, we need to like put a lot more structure around all of this, or what happened?
I think both, if I'm completely honest. I think it was a requirement of scale, and it has been an ongoing journey. So like I'll explain the first bit first. So as a service provider, and I suppose that context applies to a TA function, right? We wanted to be providing a consistent service. We wanted to have, hey, like our recruiters do this, they help you achieve this, we operate in this way. Then everyone knew what to expect from us from a kind of a trade perspective, if you like. You're paying for this, you're getting this, so from a very simple transaction perspective. But I think that applies to internal TA teams as well, right? Like, hey, we're a team, we have this capability, this is how we operate, let's work with you to make sure how we can align that from a business perspective. So as we got bigger, as we had more customers, as we had more mini TA teams operating, we wanted to make sure that, to a degree, there's obviously an element of flexibility and customization, but that the Scede service was consistent. Personally, like I'm a very kind of emotional leader, but I would be stressed to the max if we had, spoke to a customer and said, hey, we did one project with Scede in this year and we experienced this, but then when we did another project with them, it's completely different. They did something completely opposite to that, and it wasn't the same. So that was a kind of something that we wanted to try and create some balance on. And then the journey of it is ongoing. We're continually iterating sort of through those different pieces, but we kind of work on what we call the Scede product, which is those layers that we've mentioned, right? Like, what are the fundamental skills? They're super, super important from a consistency perspective, again, so our customers know what they're getting from us. We're not talking rocket science here, right? Like, I think I don't want to downplay recruitment as a craft. It's an art and a science all in one. But where I see recruiters and recruiting teams performing or the inverse, underperforming. It's quite often the consistency and repeatability of those kind of fundamental skills that determine success or not, right? So we focus very heavily on that. We don't over engineer it. It's like some core 5-6 pieces sort of as components of how to recruit. And then again, processes, rituals, how and when do we communicate with our stakeholders from an ongoing BAU perspective? How and when do we put time aside to sort of look retrospectively at what's working, what's not, using that data to drive improvement, and then sort of following advancements of that, sort of how do we use the tooling systems, advent of amazing technology to kind of, we've got this thing that drives this way, like how can we make it faster, how can we enhance it, how do we drive improvement across not just our customer but multiple customers, is something that's really interesting and makes it an ongoing thing, whether we want it to be or not.
Love the way that you consider this as like an important part of a product, and you call it the seed product. There are far too many recruitment organizations I can see where they haven't thought about it in terms of like, we're designing a product here and we're designing it's about an experience design, and it's about for recruiters and for candidates and for hiring managers. And you need to look at every touch point, and I think you need to design what's the best step and the best way of making that fluid and a great experience for everybody.
Without question, I am quite vocal about this. I do believe that TA is a product of your organization, and I'm kind of super lucky that I've had this crazy lens and having seen inside hundreds of organizations since our launch, right? Some great, some not so great, right? And where I see TA teams succeeding, there's a number of different factors, and close collaboration and leadership alignment, etc., etc. But it's those organizations that treat TA like a product, and I mean like you would your go-to-market product, right? Like if you are not talking about TA at a leadership level, like you would not dismiss conversations about your product at a leadership level, right? You would not dismiss user feedback from your product, right? Candidates, hiring managers in this context, right? You would not absolutely track everything from a performance perspective and analyze that and see what's hot, what's not, right? You wouldn't not run retros on your product and figure out what feature enhancements you're making or new features you're building in, right? So yeah, I'm a big advocate of TA is a product of your organization and a product that you should run and evaluate and iterate like you would your go-to-market product.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that you've got quite a strong footprint in the tech space, and I believe that the most sophisticated, there are exceptions, but typically the most sophisticated TA products are in the tech space, because the culture is an engineering culture. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they've had it true. Like, firstly, in the tech space, they've had to be, or if you don't, you're going to be at a disadvantage, right? I know the context is different now, but in years gone by, to be great at recruiting tech talent is a dependency to commercial success, right? So that's pushed people to invest in TA as a sort of statement. And yes, you're right, organizations that are product biased, so gaming organizations, we see tech companies are kind of very good at this type of thing, but also commercial organizations are very good as well, in different aspects, of course. Like, great commercial leaders, and I know your kind of view on recruitment is geared towards that kind of marketing side of things. Like, great commercial leaders can have incredible impact on your perspective, and I've learned a lot from commercial leaders on how to go to market with your messaging, right? A great process is one thing, and measuring it and monitoring it, etc., but there is a humongous piece in terms of how you build and distribute that message to candidate audiences and get great people interested in your brand and in your recruitment process to start with, right? So yeah, those organizations that are strong from a tech and commercial is very broad, but like a go-to-market perspective, have the knowledge in-house already, right? And they can lift and shift that to recruiting.
Yeah, I agree. I want to just ask one more question, which is, I think that recruiter enablement is vital in every recruitment team, but I think it's even more fundamental within an embedded talent RPO space, because your people are potentially working, they're representing your company, but they're also representing your customer, and they may be doing that for a defined period of time before moving on to working on a different company, that sort of thing. And so the like they're unlikely to have 3 years of time to be dedicated to working on that specific, talent acquisition brand. Would that be fair?
Fair. Yeah, I mean, there are instances where talent partners are deployed for long periods of time, but you're right, there's context shift quite frequently in an organization like ours, which is where that kind of processes and rituals and resources and information piece, and what's the company brand, the messaging, how do they talk about this, how do they talk about that, how do we handle objections in this way, like where are these candidates, like that shifts on a very, very frequent basis for us as individuals in our company. So yes, I think it's a necessity rather than a nice to have, being able to enable your recruiters in a certain way as a service provider, where people change one consistent brand from a Scede perspective, or similar organization, but multiple brands in their employee life cycle with us. So yeah, it's an interesting use case.
Wonderful. Matt, I could talk to you about this for hours, but you've given me loads of great information. I've learned a lot, and thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Adam.